A couple of years ago, we talked about Bring Me the Horizon's Sempiternal. And we noted that it was a very different album by comparison to the first couple in their career. That's the Spirit here. It has come out in 2015, and it's one that, if you felt that Sempiternal was a true difference, one that certainly showcased the band going in a different direction. That's the Spirit is an album that's going to illuminate that even further. Is it a good illumination? Is it one that's a mode or a position, a placement, a direction that many people are going to enjoy? That's really going to depend on the listener. But this is a band that certainly appears like they're heading toward a direction that combines elements of their past, and I'm speaking more of their recent past, with something even more commercial. And we know how much that word tends to dissuade us, but let's listen to it first. Let's hear what this album has to offer before we cast stones. We've heard a couple of songs off of this. We've heard Happy Song and Throne, tracks 2 and 3 off of this album. There have been a couple of others that have dropped ever since then, including, I believe, True Friends and perhaps Doomed. I don't really recall, because at that point in time, I was focused on just attacking the whole album. This is a disc that seems to really look at the production values of some pop records and maybe even some club records and draw some inspiration to that. Almost as though Bring Me the Horizon is trying to make the first ever heavy metal / hard rock club album. It has that little piece of production mentality to it, and it's one that I feel has the potential, and I know that a lot of you are going to just hate to hear this. It has the potential to maybe catch on, considering it does have some viability. It does have some potential in this day and age. But with that being said, this is a disc that I think is an experiment that the band knows will probably be successful. It has the ability, it has the potential, but the material I don't feel is completely there. This is one that's filled with some simpler lyricism. It's not one that needs to have a lot of introduction. It's not one that needs to be really tied down by a lot of crafty or expensive metaphor. It's instead one that is a bit direct and a bit simplified. And with that being said, with this band, that will be a bit of a change, a shock to the system to some, while others will merely embrace the direction considering the band name. I felt that Happy Song and Throne both had some great direction to them, but whenever I heard the remainder of this disc, to see that the direction was one that they were opting to embrace, the Linkin Parkisms of Throne are some that actually show up again within some other portions of the disc, but are not a consistency. It's not a consistent idea. It's instead one where it seems that this side of the band is also being coupled with some of the pop-punk bands of this generation, ones that are trying to aim to a certain aesthetic. The cleanliness of the vocals on this album definitely seems to suggest that, with the screams or the yells being a little bit more muted, either that or a little further in the background. Musically speaking, this is one that tries to use the airy atmosphere of some electronics in order to create that whole club or that denser environment where it could be almost chilled out in some ways, in some fabrics of the imagination. This is not one where the band no longer feels that they need to, really pummel their way through listeners now. Instead, they're able to do so with some airy atmospheres, with the touch of a little bit of production magic. That being said, I have to say that Follow You is a hell of a good song. It's built behind a great chorus, and it has some solid enough lyricism to back the sort of different style of music, where it feels like I'm not even talking about a rock or a metal album anymore. It feels like I'm talking about a rock, a pop album that rocks a little bit harder, that has a little bit more characteristics, a little bit more dynamic nature to it, and it's a good resultant in this case. But overall, it's one that gets tiring way too quickly. This is an idea that I could feel could be used to really separate some songs from others, but as an overall theme, it just gets really, really fucking overindulgent, especially as you get further down through this album's duration. It's one where it becomes just a bit of an over-obsession. Think about a Lud Dividium Insanus by Morbid Angel, or for those of you who are not apt to that, think of things such as Got Your Six by Five Finger Death Punch, where the simplicity, either that or a certain idea, becomes a bit of an obsession by the band. The full-fledged transfer and direction may lead to some sales, but whenever it comes to the fan base, it's going to be one that will divide many that perhaps were not divided by sempiternal. This is instead one that feels that it has this idea and this frame of mind going forward as the principal interest of the band, and it's actually one that feels divisible. It's one that feels like it has a lot of potential to cause a stir and cause a fright among many faithful members of this universe. That being said, we can safely assume that Bring Me the Horizon, for all intents and purposes, for better or for worse, is no longer really a member of a heavy metal community, instead opting to move more toward the pop territory with their sound, heading perhaps even in the direction of, as we said, a club environment in some ways, and it's mainly just based around construction. There is some definite construction here that suggests these items. And whenever I say club, I don't mean glow sticks, dance your ass off. These are not songs where you could really do much of that to it. It's instead one that feels like they just opted to chill things out a little bit and give it a little bit more atmosphere. And the result is confusing. The result is very mixed. At times it has a very great aesthetic to it. It's one that feels like an experiment that's worth sort of exploring a little bit. But once it gets to become a constant property, it's one that really dies off in a hurry. It's one that the second half of this album at times feels completely and totally unlistenable, especially whenever you get into songs such as What You Need, all the way down to Run and Drown. It feels that you're drowning in this experiment, as the song title would suggest. It feels as though this is a band that no longer feels the need to bring back that old style that they once possessed. The change is one that potentially could be good for the band. The change is one that they could potentially be aiming toward with their direction. It could be something that has been a band decision that had been thought about and perhaps tossed around the office for a little while. But overall, whenever it comes to a full-fledged result, this is an album that is going to be very transitional for a lot of individuals within the fan base, and it's going to be a transitional one for the band themselves. I feel that if they perfect this craft a little bit more, there is the potential for this album to really set up a great age for the group whenever it comes to the style of music that they've now opted to adapt. Or should I say adopt, but it's instead one that for right now is going to cause more concern and problems, I believe, than really solutions. Call it narrow-minded. Some folks will no doubt take this like it's just a brand new pool to swim in, but it is also one that it is a bit of a radical twist. It's a bit of a radical departure, one that will not be without its consequence. This is a disc that grows old before it really recovers, and as a result is a 68 out of 100. A lot of good ideas presented, but ones that eventually start to overlap one another and seem to really dent into the diversified element that the album perhaps aims to paint. It's one that has enough of a good intention in mind, however, that's the spirit seems to not have the same spirit as albums of the past that this band has given to the world. What are your thoughts of That's the Spirit, ladies and gentlemen? Cover Killer Nation. I want to know in the comments below, is this a transition that you are behind? Do you dig what Bring Me the Horizon are now doing, or is this something where you're begging for them to return to the old aesthetic? Let me know. Talk about the album. I am very interested to see your reaction toward this disc. It's one that for me comes as a bit of a shock and a surprise, but I think in the back of my mind, kind of selfishly, I'm happy to see a band actually taking this risk. Even if it means it's going to lead to an age full of music that's going to be a bit confusing and perhaps not have as much to offer as the idea sounds like it could on paper. But let me know in the comments below. I am Cover Killer Nation. I thank you very much, and I will talk to you later. Thanks a lot.